Hi guys, Buildzoid here, and today we're just going to be going through the entire Z490 lineup from MSI. It's not really first impressions because, well, I have a review sample of the MSI Z490 Unify, so obviously I kind of know a lot about that board, and I've also been just talking to MSI about their Z490 lineup quite a bit, so yeah, it's not the first time I'm seeing these. I kind of know, I already have favorites here. Essentially, there's not going to be any surprises. It's just kind of going to be me going through and going like, yeah. So let's just get into it. Starting off with the Z490 Godlike. This motherboard's supposed to go for around $750 in the US. Everywhere else, it's obviously probably going to be more expensive if you're outside of the US. So this is a very, very expensive board. You probably don't need it, but you may want it because like this board does a lot of really cool stuff for overclocking. It's also just completely loaded. The thing is, a lot of the feature combinations that this board offers, like you can get it on cheaper boards. So let's just start off with the basic stuff on the rear I/O, right? You've got 10 gig LAN, 10 gig of Quantia, 2.5 gig Realtek. You've got Thunderbolt 3. You've got BIOS flashback. You've got clear CMOS. There's other boards that have 10 gig LAN on them. There's cheaper boards that have 10 gig LAN on them. There's other boards with Thunderbolt. So yeah, and you may actually, like, in a lot of cases it would probably be more cost effective to just get like a cheap board with Thunderbolt and then buy an 10 gig add-in card than to go for the Godlike. So that's kind of the best argument to, like, so I don't really see this board as, like, I wouldn't be buying it because it has 10 gig or something. It's kind of like you want 10 gig and then you also want the Thunderbolt and then you also want the clear CMOS, the BIOS flashback. Like, you have to, but basically the only, like, mostly this is just an overclocking board to me that happens to have a bunch of fluff on top of it to sort of justify the price tag. Because, yeah, in terms of actual sort of overclocking stuff, this board, you're looking at a 16-phase 90 amp smart power stage VRM. The entire output filter for VCore and I think VCCSA, and actually all of the output filtering for the main power rails. Actually, I don't think there's a single through-hole cap anywhere near the VRM. So yeah, the only thing that runs on through-hole aluminum polymers is the actual memory. So as in the VDIMM rail. So all of the main rails going to the CPU, they're all on SMD capacitors, so the transient response on this motherboard should be absolutely incredible. You've got this massive VRM heatsink, which, speaking of the VRM heatsink, that's where I have one of my complaints. This board, for some ungodly reason, has a pair of VRM cooling fans. Why? I have no idea. They're just kind of there, and not necessary. Like, the thing is, this VRM, the 16-phase 90 amp smart power stage monstrosity, doesn't need a heatsink at all. I know for a fact that you can run this board naked. Even with a completely hammered 10900K, you can run this board completely naked. It will not overheat. It'll run hot. It'll run hot enough that if you put your, like, hand on the VRM while it's running, it'll hurt like hell. But it will not actually overheat because these are MOSFETs, not humans. Humans complain about high temperatures at around 60 degrees on metal objects. MOSFETs don't care until they're like well over 100 or over 120. Now, the capacitors do care, but the capacitors aren't right next to the MOSFETs, right? Like, the output filtering capacitors aren't right next to the MOSFETs, and the VRM doesn't even get up to 100 anyway. So, like, the heatsink is already more than enough to deal with the heat output of the VRM. The fans are... Why? Why are they there? Like, I know MSI's like, oh, we have zero frozer, which is their marketing term for, like, the fans don't run all the time. But to me, the question is, like, will these fans ever turn on? And if they never turn on, did you even need to put them on the board in the first place? Like, this is dumb. Like, VRM, like, why, like, people complained about X570 chipset fans. I could kind of understand the X570 chipset fans because, like, I don't know if it was like a requirement from AMD or something, because I saw, like, I have an engineering sample X570 board with a passive chipset heatsink. So those existed, and for whatever reason, those got canceled. But this right here is just stupid. Like, this is VRM fans. Why? So yeah, that's dumb. Other dumb things, that 6-pin power connector is physically impossible to plug in while also having 3 GPUs, making that 6-pin power connector completely bloody useless, because Normally, if you're running just 2 GPUs, you won't have a problem with the power delivery capabilities of the 24-pin power connector. That's only a concern if you're running like 3 GPUs. Well, you can't fit 3 GPUs and the 6-pin at the same time, so that's really dumb. But other than that, you've got some really cool overclocking features on this board. So you've got a failset button, which is MSI's equivalent of the safe boot button, which is awesome. I love safe boot. I love failset. It's a great feature. If you're into overclocking, you probably love failset. There's a retry button, which just allows you to force reset the system. There's dual BIOS. There's a LED off switch, which turns off all the RGB, which, like, I guess some people want to be able to turn off all the RGB. To me, that's just like a non-factor. There's voltage read points. You've got a postcode hiding up above the silly OLED screen. Actually, let's scroll up here. Yeah, so there's a postcode hiding above the OLED screen. What else is it? You've got power reset, you've basically got everything on this motherboard, overclocking wise. Oh, and the PCB is an 8-layer. It's using the, high-end low-loss substrate for PCIe 4.0. And the memory topology is a daisy chain with tab traces, which MSI has some very big claims about what kind of memory support this has. So yeah, 2 DIMMs can go up to 5,000 megahertz, which is very, very impressive. So yeah, this is basically the best full-size ATX overclocking board. This is actually not ATX, because you can see there's your screw hole, there's the end of the board. This is eATX. And I subscribe to the school of eATX is everything that isn't quite ATX. If it's bigger than ATX, it's eATX. And there's no actual fixed size for it. And then anyway, so yeah, this is an eATX board. But essentially, if you want a 4-DIMM, the best 4-DIMM overclocking motherboard MSI makes, this is it. They're not making a better one. Because the thing is, making MSI could make something like an Apex, but the problem with making something like an Apex is those kinds of boards don't sell enough units to justify existing, which, I have to wonder if Godlikes sell that, how many Godlikes they sell. But I think there's some system integrator, Origin PC or something that, or someone who actually uses the Godlikes in some of their builds. So I guess, they sell a decent amount of those through them or something like that. Anyway, so yeah, this has a lot of cool overclocking features, but at $750, you're probably going to want to get something else, unless you really just don't care how much your motherboard costs, which, yeah, I don't think $750 is okay for a motherboard, even if it's a really cool board. And I do think it's a cool board. It's just, it just costs so damn much. So that makes it really hard to justify. Anyway, let's move on to the Meg Ace, and we can't really talk about the Ace without talking about the Unify. So I actually have a review sample of the Unify, and the difference between the Ace and the Unify is, the Unify drops the RGB. There's no RGB on the Unify. You lose some of the sort of unnecessary metal cover. Well, not really. There's a bit less metal on the Unify, which does reduce the cost. Just in terms of shipping cost for having a heavy board is higher than if you have a lighter board. Both of these boards still use the same 16 phase VRM with 90 amp smart power stages for vCore. I'm not counting all the other stuff. As the Godlike. So the power delivery in terms of power handling capacity is the same as the Godlike on these boards, which means they also don't need heat sinks, and they also definitely don't need the bloody fans. So the heat sinks are good, okay? I don't really have a problem with heat sinks. They're not necessary, but there's no harm in having them. The fan is a dumb inclusion in my opinion. That's unnecessary. So the fan is stupid. I would have preferred if they imagine if they just gave you an extra fan header on the board. I'd assume most people would prefer having an extra fan header over having the silly fan. So yeah, anyway, one of the big differences in terms of power delivery with the Ace and the Unify compared to the Godlike, of course, is, those are through-hole capacitors. Those are Nippon Chemicons, so Japanese capacitor maker, aluminum polymers, 10,000 hours if I remember correctly. So, standard high-end capacitor stuff. 10,000 hours at 105 degrees is the same rating that you'd get anywhere else. The downside to these is they're worse ESR. Well, yes, actually, there's more caps in parallel on the Godlike. So yes, the ESR on these is actually worse. The ESL per capacitor is also worse. So the transient response on these, the Unify and the Ace, is probably going to be a bit weaker than on the Godlike. You can also kind of see that because I'm not sure if there's a picture of the back of the board. Okay, there's not one here, but I think I glimpsed one going through here. Ah, there, see? So there's actually less capacitors on the back of the socket as well. So the voltage regulation on these two is probably going to be a bit worse than what you get with the Godlike. The, 10, 20 millivolts maybe, is my guess. Like, I'm guessing there, but I will be measuring that. I'm definitely building a Z490 probinator, so I can take oscilloscope measurements of the voltage regulation on all these boards. And unlike with X570, it won't be tedious AF and likely to break boards. Anyway, so the power delivery, you get the same power handling capacity as the Godlike, you just get less like worse voltage regulation. Now, the main difference between the Unify and the Ace, other than the lack of RGB, is if we look at the rear I/O. Yeah, so this is a 1 gig Intel and a 2.5 gig Realtek, and this is a 2.5 gig Realtek only. Both boards still have the still have the Wi-Fi 6, you have the BIOS flashback, clear CMOS, all that good stuff. But my favorite feature on both of these boards is the fact that they both have a failset jumper. So down in this area, there's a jumper that has so the Godlike has a failset button, but these have a failset jumper, and that's good enough. Like, just get your own button, and you have you have a failset button, and yeah, you have safe boot functionality on your motherboard. The Ace is around $400, which I have no idea why you would buy it, because the Unify is $300. Like, at that point, you could buy the Unify and literally get yourself a 1 gig Intel add-in card, and it would cost less than the Ace. Admittedly, you'd be giving up some of your PCIe slots, but considering we live in an age where dual GPU setups are very dead, well, actually, if you're using a 1 gig, you can run it off of the 1x PCIe slot. So, you're not really losing any major important PCIe lanes to a 1x 1 gig card. So, actually, can you get 1x for 1 gig? I'm not sure, but you can get like I know 10 gig cards actually need quite a few PCIe lanes, but I can't remember. Like, 1 gig has to take well, whatever. You can get an add-in card, and I think that's a better solution than getting an Ace to the networking disparity between the two boards. And if there's any other difference between these two boards, I'm not aware of it. So I really don't know what they're doing with the Ace's price point, because this is a $400 board, and essentially it adds a bunch of RGB, which doesn't do anything, so it isn't worth anything to me. And it might be to some people, but in my opinion, like, RGB is dumb. And it adds 1 gig, where it's like, but 1 gig, I'm pretty sure you can get 1 gig add-in cards for like $20. So you can get 10 gig add-in cards for like $100. So, like, for the cost difference, you can have 10 gig. Anyway, both of these boards still have dual 8 pins, which, as I mentioned with the Godlike, if you're going to max a 10900K, the dual 8 pins are actually helpful. These are 6-layer PCBs, so they're worse at memory overclocking than the Godlike is, though the claims are still quite impressive, right? 4800 on 1 DIMM per channel, and up to 4400 on, so if you're running like a 4x8 setup, this should run 4400. It's interesting that the 2x16 setup would be weaker, because this is a daisy chain topology. Like, MSI for Z490, all of their boards are daisy chains. They all use tabbed traces. There are differences in the layer counts. Godlike is an 8, this is a 6. Yeah, like, I'm surprised that this actually goes down to 4266 on 2x16. But at the same time, like, part of that's going to be the fact that 16 gig DIMMs are kind of rare. Like, you don't see that many people running them. So support for 4x8 is generally better than support for 2x16 from just sort of a software perspective. I'm not sure if there's also like a hardware, like a major physical disadvantage with the like the dual rank PCB layouts for memory sticks. That might be part of it as well, but yeah. So this, slightly less ridiculous memory speed support on this board. and the Unify. Same, like this has the same layer count, and both boards have postcodes, power button, reset button, as I mentioned, also the fail set. There's an LED off switch. They don't have dual BIOS, which is kind of like, you still have BIOS flashback, so it's not like you're going to be completely screwed if you, you still have a potential way of getting the board working if you have a bad BIOS, like if you go through a bad BIOS flash or something like that. Yeah, so the Unify, the Ace, I can't really recommend the Ace in my opinion, mostly because the Unify exists. Just wondering if there's maybe something I missed. Nope, this is the same. Yeah, like I don't know why you'd get the Ace when the Unify is a thing. 'Cause well, you don't well, it doesn't do anything though. That's not a full cover like yes, it makes the board less flexible, but yeah, no, I don't get it. Buy a Unify. If you don't like the networking capabilities of the Unify, buy your own add-in card for networking. Like most people have, when they do ATX builds, they'll have their ATX board and one GPU and nothing else. And it's just like, just get yourself a networking card, right? Like, it's not really going to change anything about your build. It's not like you're going to use those extra PCIe slots anyway. So, yeah. Like, I really, really like the Unify because this board is around $300. And at $300, like, I think this is the cheapest board on Z490 with a failset jumper. And like that alone, as well as like at $300, the postcode is actually standard. There's a bunch of other boards at this price point with postcodes, but there are not that many boards with power buttons and reset buttons. And I'm not aware of another board with a failset jumper. So this is a winner in my opinion. Like this is one of the top Z490 boards because you just get so much for $300 with this. And there's still voltage read points on this as well as the Ace, of course. Like, these are the same board. It's just like one of them is missing some extra networking stuff in the RGB. So I'm just going to go through, like, well, I really don't think I'm missing anything. Like, the thing is, on X570, MSI did the same thing. They have an X570 Ace, which is basically, and then they released the Ace first, and then they released the Unify, and the Unify did everything the Ace does, minus a network. Like, one of the network controllers was missing. That was the only difference between the two boards, and it was just like, so why on earth would you buy an Ace? Especially because I think the price gap. There it wasn't as big of a problem, because if I remember correctly, the price gap was like $50 or $70, not $100. But with these two, it's $100. Like, you can get a lot of stuff for $100 that you're not getting with the switch between these two boards, right? Like, yeah, so you saw the networking there. Yep, that's literally the only difference. You can just go between the two spec lists and do that, and it's just like, so Ace is dumb. I really don't get, like, if you can't find a Unify and you want the features of the Unify, then I guess you can go get an Ace, but I would just wait to buy a Unify. Like, it is so much cheaper. You could upgrade your cooling system, you can upgrade your memory kit, you can upgrade your, like, there are so many things you could probably get you could get yourself the 1 gig Intel and like a better memory kit or a better cooler or a better anything, right? Like, the price gap between the two boards is absolutely ridiculous considering that there's very little difference between them. Anyway, so moving on to the Z490 gaming Carbon Wi-Fi. Oh, they dropped the Pro in the Carbon name. I liked saying Pro Carbon. Didn't like, it rolls off the tongue better than Gaming Carbon, my opinion. Anyway, so what do we have here? So yeah, now we've got like 8+4 pins, still a 6-layer PCB, so the memory overclocking is still going to be very... Is it going to be the same? It should be the same. Like, I'm assuming they're not changing to... Oops. Oops. Yep, good job, me. Let's go back there. Somebody's going to be in the comments like, you can control click to open in a tab, and it's like, yeah, I'm one-handing the video out of convenience. Anyway, well, I'm waving around my left hand as I'm talking through this, so obviously I can't use it for shortcuts. Yeah, so same memory. Yeah, exactly. So it's a 6-layer daisy chain with still the same tab traces. So especially because like tab traces are actually quite difficult to implement as far as I know. So if you're gonna design it once, you probably don't want to stop using that design, right? Um, so you want to recycle the design as much as possible. And well, we're seeing that right here because this is the exact same memory speed claims as for the Unify and the Ace. This board is going to be around $260, $270. And let's just take a quick look at the rear I/O. You get, well, I'm not a fan of the USB port situation. It's not horrible yet, but it's getting there, right? This is 6 USB ports and a Type-C, so if it was 5 USB ports and a Type-C, then it would be like, nope. That's a nope from me. At this price point, though, you can definitely get boards with more USB ports, though you don't necessarily get boards with the, like the PS/2, I mean the PS2 port. Like I think the boards with more USB ports don't have the PS2 port. So if you want PS2, then I guess this is a good option for that. The 2.5 gig on this is Realtek. Like MSI's 2.5 gig LAN on all of their boards is Realtek. So yeah, I'm not really like I don't do networking reviews, okay? So don't put too much weight into my opinion on Realtek LAN. It's just like my personal experience, my anecdotal personal experience is that I don't like Realtek LAN. That doesn't mean it's actually horrible. It's just like, yeah, I don't like, I've not had great experiences with it. I've not tested it in recent times. So, you know, hopefully there's somebody who like, some, like, I assume someone's going to do like networking tests on motherboards, or somebody should do that kind of thing. The thing is, I don't really, like, I don't even have a 2.5 gig switch. So it's like, how could I test if 2.5 gig Realtek is better than 2.5 gig Intel, right? There's no way I'm doing that. So, anyway, yeah, so with this board, like, you get a solid VRM on this, but it's not like this is a, like, I think this is just a 12-phase, right? 1, 2, 3, because this is going to be VCCSA down here, so 1, 2, 3, 6, and then there's an iGPU phase. Yeah, so this is, actually 2-phase iGPU maybe. Anyway, so this is going to be like a 12-phase vCore. Wait a minute. Is this the wrong? Oh, no. Yeah, I am correct. 1-phase SA. 12, yeah, okay. Hey, this is actually really cool. They've really improved on the VR marketing side of things. Yeah, I think, though... No, this is still the board that has the actual 12-phase, because MSI has a board where they're doing the ASUS thing, where you take your power stages and you just feed one PWM signal into 2 power stages. This still uses doublers, I think. And these are 60 amp smart power stages, which actually at this price point, this might be one of the more powerful VRMs, like slightly more powerful. So I'm not sure how much cooler it'll end up running. The thing is, like, at the same time, this price point is just ridiculously competitive, because basically all, like, Gigabyte has a 12-phase at this price point. Asus has a 12-phase at this... I mean, Asus doesn't do phases. Asus has 12 power stages on a 6-phase, if I'm not mistaken. And still, that's fine. Like, Asus has their workarounds for the relatively low phase counts. And the thing is, though, Gigabyte does have the tantalum capacitors in the back of the socket, so it's like... I don't know, like, there's nothing, like, this is not a bad board, it's just, like, I'm not sure I would choose this. There's nothing, like, you do have, well, all of them have troubleshooting LEDs at this price. There's nothing on this board to me that, like, stands out and makes it like, oh my god, this is the board to get at this price point. It's just like, well, it's a decent ATX board. Also, this picture doesn't have enough pixels. And this one isn't much better. But, yeah, well, they have an LED off switch. But, I don't know. Like, do you actually want to buy a motherboard just for an LED off switch? Yeah, just I like, so there's nothing inherently wrong with this board. It's just like, I don't know that I would actually buy this one. Out of all the motherboards around this price point, this is like, I don't think you'd be disappointed if you bought it. I also don't know that it would be, you know, like, I don't think I would choose this one. I would probably actually drop down in the price. And the reason why I'd actually lower the price is because, so you've got the gaming Carbon, then you've got the gaming Edge. And this is, I think, still the same VRM and still the same 6-layer PCB. And I think the main loss is that you lose a PCIe slot. So this is one of the things. But this board, I think, is approaching like $220. I should have really had Newegg up for this. Let's just grab a Newegg tab. See, initially I was like, oh yeah, I totally remember all of the various motherboard prices. Like, MSI doesn't even have that big a product stack. How could I possibly not remember the prices? It's just like, MSI has the most awful naming scheme out of everyone, where I'm like, is Edge higher than Plus? I'm not sure. They're both MPG boards as well. It's just... I like the Gigabyte naming scheme better. Like, well, the Gigabyte naming scheme doesn't really make any much sense either, but it's like you have Extreme, Master, Ultra, Pro, Elite, right? And like, that's easy to remember, at least for me for some reason. Whereas Edge, oh, I know why I have such a hard time with this, because I know the Z490, so the VRM on this, I know for a fact is not great. That's the issue. And so now I have but I can't remember which one... Like, this is the thing. Don't share names between boards that have completely different VRMs. You'll confuse me. It's like, if you don't want me to get confused, like, you need to make the names really distinct. Anyways, so, by price. Gaming Edge. Okay, this one's oh no, this is $200. And the Gaming Plus is $107. Oh, okay. Yeah, that makes way more sense. Though this, I think, still is on power stages. Let's see. They had a great power solution image. Oh, no. Wait, really? Now I need to go pull up more document. I do have the document. I do have the MSI document. Yay! Okay. Read. Let's see. Gaming Carbon. That's on the... Yeah, Gaming Carbon's on the 60s. Gaming Edge. Also 60s. Yeah, so this is actually like a good VRM. And then the mATX Gaming Edge is on discrete MOSFETs, which is dumb. Like, that's what causes so much confusion for me. Also, this image is wrong. Like, either either what MSI sent me about the VRM specs is wrong, or this is wrong, because the document I have from MSI says that this is supposed to have 60 amp smart power stages. These are discrete MOSFETs. There's a big difference. 60 amp smart power stages are a hell of a lot more efficient than discrete MOSFETs. Which just... Actually, this doesn't even look like... Well... Like, I'm not sure that are those the same capacitors? Gaming Because I'm pretty sure the VRM is supposed to look like this. Except maybe different capacitors. And instead we have this, which... Yeah. So I'm not sure what's up with that. Okay, so this is $200. According to Newegg. Which I forgot to pull in the Newegg tab. So let's grab that. There. So here's your Gaming Edge Wi-Fi. And that's actually $200 with the Wi-Fi on it. And I think it's still on a 6-layer PCB, so let's check. Actually, no. They dropped... Wait, 4800. Oh, right. The basic spec is I guess out of date. Oh no, I'm just blind. I didn't notice the 4800. So yeah, this is still on the same 6-layer PCB. So this is the thing, is like, even on $200 Z490 boards, you're going to have the same memory topologies as on like the $300 to $400 boards. So, you know, if you're running, like, if you don't need the VRM for a 10900K, or you don't need or you're just, well, or you just have good airflow, right? Like, that's the thing, is like, you could totally go with a board like this and like not lose much at all compared to the really high-end boards. I actually like the Why does this have more USB ports than the Wait. It does have more USB ports than the Carbon. I swear, it's completely random how many USB ports a motherboard gets these days. It's just like, just throw some in the rear I/O. Who knows? Sometimes there's, what is this, 7? Sometimes there's 6. Sometimes there's 5, and that's when I get annoyed. So this does still have Wi-Fi 6, 2.5 gig Realtek. You also have a Type-C port. What else is there? Like, you get a solid VRM. Like, this is, at $200, this is a really nice solid board. The biggest argument against this motherboard, though, is MSI's own Tomahawk. You might have noticed a trend at this point where it's like, so you shouldn't buy an Ace because MSI makes the Unify. Similarly, you shouldn't probably buy the Edge because MSI makes a Tomahawk. And, well, that's like the same rear I/O, except you also get 1 gig. I guess if you want the Wi-Fi, then, you know, you get Wi-Fi with the Gaming Edge, which you don't get on the Tomahawk, but it's a desktop. How many people use Wi-Fi on their desktops? And then, I think this is still on the same layer count. So I'm not sure about that, but let's check. Yep, that's still the same memory topology. So, you know, like, and this board is even cheaper. This is $190. Like, at that point, like, well, is a Wi-Fi 6 module $10? Probably not, but you'd have, well, I don't know. Like, it's up to you. If you don't need Wi-Fi 6, then you could just go and buy, like, a cheap Wi-Fi dongle or, you know, PCIe card. Anyway, so the Tomahawk VRM, so the VRM does get a bit weaker with this board. That's part of why it's so also a little bit, like, cheaper. But it's not a significant downgrade because this goes down to 55 amp power stages, not smart, well, no, just DR-MOS components from onsemi. So yeah, this goes down to 55 amp power stages, which, like, that's still really good because there's 12 of them. And this is running as a 6-phase, so this doesn't have any doublers in it. It's just like, this is an Asus-style VRM, essentially. That's the best way to think of it. This is an Asus-style VRM. And you know what? That's completely fine, as far as I'm concerned. Especially on like a $200 board, actually sub $200 board. So you've got a great VRM, you got 1 gig, I think it's 1 gig Intel as well. So, oh no, you get 1 gig Realtek, 2.5 gig Realtek. Wait, wrong board, idiot. No, this one. I'm an idiot. Yeah, good job me. Okay, no, yeah, you get 1 gig Intel, you get 1 gig, 2.5 gig Realtek. Like, this is one of my favorite motherboards in MSI Z490 lineup. And it's just like, and it's also, well, the thing is, Z490 boards don't really get much cheaper than this, and I feel like you're giving up potentially quite a bit if you go down to something like the Z490-A, right? So Tomahawk is a great freaking board. The Gaming Edge Wi-Fi, it's just like, I guess if you really want the Wi-Fi, you can get it, but I'd get the Tomahawk instead. Though the VRM on this might be should be slightly more efficient, but at the same time, it's like, it's not something a fan wouldn't fix, you know. Like, and again, it's $10 cheaper. Like, you can spend $5 on a fan, right? So yeah, this is a really, really cool board in my opinion. Just in terms of everything, I really, really like it. Yeah, Tomahawk is cool. And then we get, so that was the Gaming Edge Wi-Fi, so I guess let's look at the Gaming Plus. So the Gaming Plus is $170, and this is on actual discrete MOSFETs with the VRM, is it? Let me just quickly check. I'm pretty sure this is on discrete. Yeah, Gaming Plus, discrete MOSFETs. So you've basically got like 4 MOSFETs per phase with 2 inductors in each phase, so it's a giant 6-phase. Yeah, so here the actual image is correct. At least if, wait, core boost, what? You know what I find funny? If they had put the fan that they put on the Unify on the Tomahawk, that would have actually made so much, like, that would have been far more reasonable than putting the fan on the Unify. It's like that's the issue I have with the fans is like this board might actually need a VRM fan in some scenarios. The Unify definitely doesn't. Like you can literally take the heat sinks off the Unify, it'll be fine. This you probably want the heat sinks and maybe some extra airflow. And so here the fan would actually make sense. And it's just like, nope, let's put it on the $300 board with the VRM of a, of our flagship. Like anyway, so this board now we've got to start losing things, right? Like they can't possibly. Oh no, they are still using the same 6-layer PCB, so the memory support is still incredible. Um, well, let's take a look at that rear I/O because that looks. Yeah, no. This is nope for me. Um, like, well, admittedly, I'm a bit of a USB port hog, but like the thing is, this is what this is $70. This is $90. You go up $20, you get a better VRM, you get a better rear I/O, you get more like. Admittedly, a lot of people might not need a lot of the things that I'm like it's so that are like better, but I kind of feel like they should like the thing is I don't like the VRM for this price either. Like it's just like there's a lot of things about this board that I don't really like. Um, and it's 170. The thing is, there's a gigabyte board at like 180 that's like an 11 phase using 50 amp power stages, which has a similar, which I think has a better rear I/O configuration. Except that, well, okay, I need to keep closing tabs because otherwise I keep getting messed up. So yeah, this is the Gaming Plus, right? Yeah, this is the Gaming Plus. Like, though that doesn't have the 2.5 gig, that's just on like 1 gig Intel. So yeah, like down here, you're gonna have to be really picky with what you want, unless you don't care about anything, in which case, why are you even coming to me for motherboard purchasing advice? Um, right? Like if you're not overclocking, if you don't care about how many USB ports you have, like why don't you just buy a Ryzen 5 3600 and like wait for a B550 board? Um, all right, like the thing is like you need to figure out what you want to do with your board because if it's just like I want to stick a CPU into it and a graphics card and then plug in my mouse and keyboard and that's it. I'm never going to plug in anything more than that into my motherboard, then it's like, well, I guess you'll be happy with basically anything, right? At that in that kind of situation and like yeah, sure. Like this makes sense in that scenario. Um I do like the heat sinks MSI has on this. Like these are very substantial heat sinks, and they actually have some decent like surface area added into it, which I know it doesn't look like much, but putting the fins the way like doing the fins like this actually works quite well. Um, so yeah, the thing is it doesn't work so well if you test it on like a flat open air test bench because well, those fins are supposed to work in a vertical configuration, right? They're similar to like if you've ever seen really large passive cases, they'll just have vertical, like massive vertical fins. MSI is kind of doing the same thing with the VRM heatsinks here. Um, so the airflow has to go sort of upwards across the board. Yeah. So anyway, this is a like there's nothing inherently wrong with the board. Like, well, the VRM I wouldn't necessarily run a 10900K on this. Um, 8 core you might get away with. Like an 8 core you could probably get away with, but the 10 core I wouldn't really. Well, it depends how committed you are. Like if you stick a fan on the VRM, you probably could run even the 10 core. Like that's the thing is like applying brute force airflow is really overpowered. So yeah, if you buy this and then buy like $5 worth of fans, then you could probably run a 10900K on this, and it wouldn't have any issues. Um, at the same time, it's like you could also well, I really like the Tomahawk. That's the thing, and then this board, there's nothing inherently that wrong with it, except maybe the power delivery. Like I don't think the oh yeah, see here you can see the fins quite a bit better. So this is actually like a good way to do the heatsink as far as I'm concerned. Um, but You still have debug LEDs. That's nice. But yeah, like this is just not my kind of board. So let's move on from that. mATX Gaming Edge. So I don't like the fact that this board uses the same name as that other Gaming Edge, because this board is on the same power delivery as this board, as the Gaming Plus. Like, in my opinion, this should be a Gaming Plus. Well, I guess... Oh, I guess they're differentiate... Well, actually, no. The rear I/O on this isn't that great either. Right? Like, you've got 2.5 gig... Oh, it's the Wi-Fi 6. Of course it's the Wi-Fi 6. That's why it's an Edge. It's an Edge, therefore it gets Wi-Fi 6. There's better mATX options. Well, like, better high-end... Like, I'm not sure where they're going to price this. I don't think it's going to be a $200 board. At the same time, like, Wi-Fi 6 tends to be kind of expensive. It doesn't look like they have any PCIe switches, right? This doesn't support two-way SLI, right? Like... Two-way SLI, two-way crossfire. Okay, I'm pretty sure this will run four-way crossfire if you use dual GPU cards, but... You'd have to check the manual for that. I'm not doing that. Like, what I'm wondering is if that X16 slot is off of the chipset or off of the CPU, but it looks like it's off of the chipset. Which I guess, like, this is probably... So I'm going to assume this is going to be under $200. And... So if you wanted a high-end mATX board, or like, well, no, there's not really any high-end mATX boards, but there's a really nice mATX board in the form of the Z490-G from Asus, because they've basically taken one of their $250 ATX boards, chopped off the bottom, and you got an mATX board. And so I like that. This right here, like 8-core, 6-core, 6-core definitely. Like this should absolutely be great for overclocking a 6-core. Should have no problem with that. I wonder what the memory is like. Of course, the same topology. Like, this is a 6-layer PCB at this price point. I guess that's for the PCIe 4.0. So, like, this board, like, this is the same issue for me as the Gaming Plus. It's just, like, really depends on what you're doing. At least the rear I/O on this isn't... Actually, no, it's still 5 USB ports. Like, put 6 or 7. Like, you could have totally had 7 as far as I'm concerned. Like, actually, the Godlike has the Ethernet on top of the Type-C, and, well, actually, I don't know how much those cost, but... Yeah, I would have preferred 2 more like 1 or 2 more USB ports. I would have really preferred, like, liked to see that, but, well, whatever. Most people don't use that many USB ports as I do. The thing is, like, I'm not sure how that mATX board is going to compare, because Asus has a Z490 mATX board that uses actual 50 amp power stages, but they only have 8 of them. So I'm not sure how, like, 12 MOS, like, what MSI is doing here with the 6, like, massive 6 phases that they have. I'm not sure how that works out against the 8, like, 4-phase, like even larger 4-phase that Asus has, right? Like, I'm not sure which one wins. Like, this should have lower thermal density, but I'm not sure. Like, this has more surface area. Like, the VRM here just spread, like, it's a bigger VRM. Physically, there's more area to it, so it shouldn't have as high, like, so if the efficiency isn't too far off of what Asus is doing, then this probably would end up with better thermals. The heat sinks from MSI look far more substantial than what Asus is doing on their low-end mATX offering. So, yeah, this is a board that I'd like to see tested. It's not really a board I'm very interested in testing myself, to be completely honest, though. Like, that's kind of the thing, is just like, this is definitely not up my alley, but... Right, and there's no price tag for it, but... Yeah, like, this doesn't look horrible. This looks like it could be one of the best, you know, cheaper mATX boards out there. But that's like, there's not really much competition in that department. It's definitely not the worst mATX. I will say that. Like, this is definitely not the worst mATX board there is. At the, like, even in the low price point. I'm not sure it might even be the best in this price range. It's really hard to say. But, Yeah, at least the memory overclocking on this thing is going to be amazing because it uses the same topology as the freaking Unify. Um, so I get like if I'd be confident running a 6 core on that. And I actually like depending on where that ends up. The thing is, they might have that at $200. Like it has Wi-Fi, it has a 6-layer PCB, which even the Gaming Plus is on a 6-layer, isn't it? Yes, it is. Man, they're really not like holding back on the layer counts for Z490. Um, yeah. So this is a board to like check to see if there's like a good review of this. Like if this has some good reviews from somebody else, because I'm not really interested in testing it that much. Who knows? Like the thing is, I'm not interested in like piling up a bunch of boards right now. I'm maybe down the line if I run out of stuff to do, I'll ask MSI to send one over, and hopefully they'll still have samples ready in like a month, in a couple months. Um, because yeah, that actually looks like that doesn't look like a terrible, like a completely terrible option. It really depends where it ends up in terms of pricing. I like if it's the same price as the ATX Edge, then I'm not really a fan. If it's cheaper though, then I could do, you know, I'd be, I think that would be cool. So now we finally get to the Dash A Pro, or yeah, Dash A Pro. Why do boards have Dash A? Like, why is it so popular to have Dash A? Like, Asus has a bunch of Dash A boards. Um, like, why don't you just call it the Z490 Pro? Oh, I guess that would line up with gigabytes. Get more creative with the names. Actually, you know what? Maybe don't get more creative with the names because MSI had like the Tomahawk. Like I'm pretty sure the only reason they're keeping the Tomahawk name around is because the B450 Tomahawk was so popular. Um, because yeah, like there was the Tomahawk, the mortar, they had the bazooka. Like bazooka is just like even Tomahawk is a dumb motherboard name as far as I'm concerned. But like they're keeping it because the B450 Tomahawk has a lot of recognition as a good board. And that's fair. Like that's actually a good board. But then it's like bazooka and mortar, and it's just like okay, you know what? Don't be creative with the names. Those were terrible. Um, so yeah, the issue is now they're stuck with this stupid name where it's like that's like, and then for X570 the Tomahawk is again a really nice board, and then for Z490 they have another really nice Tomahawk, and it's just like they're gonna have like completely different, like in 2 years they're gonna have a completely different naming scheme for the rest of their entire lineup, and we're still gonna get like a Z690 Tomahawk, and it's just gonna be completely. It's just completely stupid in my opinion that we're stuck with like they're kind of stuck with that name now. It's just like, okay, well, good job. Maybe should have been less creative in the past. Anyway, so Dash A Pro, uh, yeah, I'm not a fan of that. But you know, like, there's plenty of people who don't need that many USB ports. The VRM heatsinks, like, obviously these are a downgrade from what you get on some of the other boards. I think the power delivery though is still the same as you'd get on the mATX, like Gaming Plus, like the actual MOSFETs. So I wonder if this is kind of like, don't get the Gaming Plus, get the Dash A instead. Um, yeah, that's the same VRM configuration. So now we need to figure out what's the difference between the Gaming Plus and the Dash A. Other than, you know, this has a gaming, like the funny thing is, like MSI's justification for the existence of this board is that it has, probably is that it has gaming in the name, which just makes it sell so much better. That's why literally everything is called gaming now. Oh yeah, this still has the same 6-layer PCB. So that's really cool. I guess it makes sense. They just don't want to run different PCBs at all, or like different topologies at all. Actually, this is probably exactly the same PCB and they've just taken stuff off. Or maybe shrunk the heat sinks. Like heat sinks themselves are actually quite expensive. Especially with like, because the thing is they're not just like bare aluminum blocks with a bunch of surface area, right? You've got all the inscriptions on them and the texturing and the anodization, and they're not just like, they're not like, these are still going to be, I'm going to assume these are still extruded heat sinks, but for the main shape of the fin stack, but they ultimately end up cutting them funky, and that takes time and adds manufacturing cost. So I'm surprised they didn't ditch the chipset heatsink, because the chipset doesn't really, like Z490 still doesn't really need a chipset heatsink very much. Um, you still have the same, like, actually, let's just do this, right? Scroll up to detail. I don't think there's a difference. Or if there is one, I'm not seeing it. So let's scroll down to expansion slot. Do the same over here. Oh, it's kind of harder to align, but... Oops. Yeah, there's not much of a difference whatsoever. I think there's an audio difference. Yeah, okay. Yeah, they've changed the supports SP-diff out on this. But other than that, it's the same board. So, yeah. I guess if you're considering the Gaming Plus, stop considering the Gaming Plus and consider the Dash A instead. This would definitely be solid for a 6-core. The thing is, like, the power delivery... Well, yeah, no, it's still... Both of them only have 4 SATA ports. Like, they're the same board. So... And this one's like 20 bucks cheaper. That's significant. Like, if the VRM cooling situation isn't up to the task of your CPU, you can always buy a fan for $5. Right? Because the VRM itself is the same. So the biggest difference there is, like, the heat sinks. And, well, let's see if they have a better picture of that heatsink. But that doesn't look that bad. And also, you have to consider, like, they don't have all six of the phases under one of the heatsinks. I think it works out. It looks like they have 3. So actually, if anything, the part of the VRM that's going to run the hottest is the top part. With the smaller heatsink. Because they've really split it half-half. Which I think is... Well, it's actually kind of awkward because it is just a 6-phase. So you're like, you can basically split it 3-3, or you can split it 6-2. I mean 4-2. Yeah, so they didn't really have, I think, a better option. That looks like a decent amount of surface area on that heatsink. Especially considering that it's not going to be dealing with the entire heat output of the whole VRM. Like, it's split between 2 heatsinks. The second heatsink, not that impressed with. It still shouldn't be too bad. You've got your 8-pin and your 4-pin. Now this looks solid. So I'm not really sure why you'd get the Gaming Plus instead. Like, the Gaming Plus, the heatsinks on the Gaming Plus are probably quite a bit more substantial, aren't they? Yeah, they are. Yep, that's quite a bit more substantial, but actually, the surface area-wise, they might be about the same. Just because, like, this one has those, like, rather large fins in the back going through that area. And this one doesn't. Like, this looks just like a straight slant right there. I wish we could see the top heatsink better. Oh, no. Is there anything about power? No. Reliable components. Okay, well. That's not what I was hoping for. That's a shame. Right, core boost. Because I can't tell if that that top heatsink is different or not. That looks like it's the same thing. In which case, because the hot part of this VR actually, so the funny thing is also the top part, like the top heatsink on most motherboards is actually far away. Like, generally will get more airflow than the rear I/O heatsink. So for a low-end board, I actually quite like this. This looks pretty good. At $160, which is not the cheapest Z490, but I think the cheapest is like $149 or maybe $139. So, you know, you could go maybe 20. And at that point, you're looking at boards where it's like, how about no, as far as I'm concerned. So, yeah, so I'm actually like, I rather like the Dash A. Like, that's actually not as bad as I thought it would be. So I guess let's take a look at the ITX Unify at this point. And this thing's really cool. This thing is really, really cool. Now, I'm not really... So, out of the ITX boards in terms of power delivery, this one's the one with the least SMD capacitors for the V-Core VRM. At the same time, it has basically the same power delivery as most of the other, like, high-end ITX boards. So, we're looking at 90 amp smart power stages, true 8-phase, no doublers, no nothing, just straight from the ISL 69269 into your 90 amp smart power stages. And then we have a bunch of like, the thing is, Gigabyte has the same power, like same VRM configuration, but they also have tantalum, like their entire output filter is just tantalum capacitors. So, and they also have the 10-layer PCB. This is on a 10-layer PCB. Though, so Gigabyte, like I think for ITX, Gigabyte might have the best power delivery. Like I wouldn't be surprised if that was the case, or they might be tied with Asus. That is my guess for what would happen if for like scope shots on ITX. Now, in terms of memory overclocking, MSI is doing some really cool stuff here. These are SMT DIMM slots. These aren't through-hole DIMM slots. These are SMT DIMM slots. SMT DIMM slots have better parasitics than the through-hole DIMM slots, and so in theory, these should clock memory higher. And actually, let's check the specs. And yeah, MSI for 16 gig DIMMs, like 45, like for 16 gig B-die DIMMs, 4500 is amazing. That's a very impressive speed to claim. And 5/5, like yeah, this is going to be like, if you're into memory overclocking, this is way up there. Also on the rear IO, like this is ITX grade rear IO, right? They've managed to squeeze a fan into the rear IO, so the VRM really shouldn't run very hot at all. Clear CMOS button. Like I really like that they managed to squeeze that in there. We've also got, you know, the 5 USB ports, but it's an ITX board. I'm willing to let that pass. I feel like they could have squeezed one more USB port over here. Like they really could have tried to squeeze one more USB port on there. Of course, you still got your Wi-Fi 6, which on ITX systems, I do think, like, on ITX, I think the Wi-Fi makes more sense than on like full ATX boards, especially like eATX boards. Like, how likely are you to move a eATX motherboard based system, right? Okay, now back to the specs. Still on the Realtek 2.5 gig LAN. That's like, all the 2.5 gig on MSI is always Realtek. So yeah, that's one thing to keep in mind. The one thing I don't like with this board is that MSI does use standard current power connectors. And as I mentioned earlier, like, you can max out a standard current 8-pin with a 10900K. Like, you need a hell of a lot of cooling to do it, but you can definitely max one out. And, well, I guess at the same time, well, and the thing is, like, Asus and Gigabyte, their ITX board have solid pin power connectors. In fact, I think even ASRock has the same solid pin power connectors, and those are the high current variant of the power connector. Those are 13 amps per pin pair, whereas this is 8.5. So this tops out at, if I remember correctly, 384 watts. You can go over that somewhat, which basically means, like, for ITX, like, the thing is, most ITX users will not be, you know, hammering for, like they're not going to have a 360 millimeter radiator custom loop. They're, you know, like, ITX isn't where you get the ridiculous power consumption. So for most people, the 8-pin is, like, you know, not really a big deal, but I would have preferred to see a solid pin power connector, especially on the ITX board. Like, on the ATX boards, I don't care, because MSI has an obsession with adding extra power connectors. Like, they have 8-pin. They've been using 8 plus 8-pin power connectors on boards where you can't do over 200 watts. Like, I'm not concerned. But here, it's like, yeah, I would have really preferred to see the actual high current version of the connector. So yeah, got a little fan. ITX is a place where you can justify the fan, as far as I'm concerned. Like, a fan on ITX makes sense. That's a very little fan, though. I wonder how much that actually manages to do. But this is one of the form factors where, okay, yeah, you can have your fan. ATX, and you put a fan in the VRM, unless it's, like, really cheap, no. So is there anything else? Like, so basically, this is like, essentially, if you love memory overclocking, this is probably the board for you. That's kind of the thing. And so I'm really interested in the Unify ITX because, yeah, I want to mess with memory overclocking. They managed to squeeze troubleshooting LEDs onto it right over here, which is really cool. I wonder if they managed to squeeze on like a failset jumper. If they squeezed a failset jumper onto this board, it would just be like they don't even need to. Like if they did though, I'd be like, oh my god, get this instead of an Apex, because um, yeah, if you're at ambient and you're not gonna go sub-zero, and they manage to squeeze in a failset jumper, or if you're never gonna run like heavy multi-core. Well, actually, heavy multi-core you could probably get away with it just because the like ITX boards when they're on LN2 they just freeze through completely. Like the entire thing just turns into a block of ice. So you don't really have to be too worried about something overheating because the board is literally a block of ice. Um, but yeah. So yeah, I don't think they squeezed in a failset, but if they had a failset jumper on this, it would just be like, oh my god, best OC board on Z490, just like that. Because failset is such a nice feature to have. Though I guess the VRM would probably like that. We'll see. We'll see. Like the thing is, this is on power stages, but I'm not a fan of the through-hole capacitors. Like I'm really not a fan of the through-hole capacitors. It's not like you can still get good performance out of them. But I wonder, like I really wonder how well this works out. So for memory overclocking, this is probably going to be one of the top Z490 boards. For CPU overclocking, I'd be like, it doesn't like it's definitely not going to be the best for CPU overclocking. There's just no way. But it could be like I wouldn't be surprised if it was like very ever so like it could range from significantly worse to very slightly worse, right? Like barely noticeable to actually like a big deal. Like there's a range to it, how much worse your overclocking can be. Because power handling wise, this is as good as it gets on an ITX, right? 8-phase, 90 amp smart power stages. You can't get a better VRM onto an ITX board. There's just not enough space for that. But yeah. As far as like, I'm just not a fan of the through holes. Like I've seen the through hole capacity. Like to be fair, the best Z390, well, the second best Z390 motherboard I tested was a Maximus 11 Gene in terms of transient response, and it uses a bunch of through hole capacitors, so they can work. The thing is, this doesn't even have that many of them, which is like another concern. Like one of the workarounds for using a higher ESR, higher ESL capacitor is to just put more of them in parallel, but you can't do that on an ITX board because there's not enough space. There's like 8 caps total here. And if we compare that to something like, well, let's check the ATX Unify, right? Oh, it looks like MSI is just doing 8 everywhere. Because, okay, so that might actually work out. Or maybe they're just, like, going to have more, well, the thing is, like, if they're going to lose on anything, I'd assume this loses on overshoot. Like, if this VRM, like, this is going to just have probably more overshoot than some of the other boards. They could still keep the undershoot quite, like, well under control, but we'll see. Like, that is one thing I definitely want to test. But memory overclocking wise, this should be one of the best boards you can get. So yeah, that is the entire MSI Z490 lineup. So the highlights for me are the Unify, the ITX Unify, the Tomahawk. The Dash A is actually nice. That board makes quite a bit of sense, and the Godlike. Right, those are kind of the actually I really messed that up. So Godlike is cool, Unify is cool, ITX Unify is cool. The ITX Unify is going to be about $270. Z490 Tomahawk, Dash A. There. And why did you do it that way? So, yeah, this is like your ridiculous mega overkill motherboard that you don't need for $750. This is the sweet spot at $300. Like, yeah, this is if you love memory overclocking way too much, And this is what I'd get if you don't want to spend over $200 on a board. And this is what I like. This is not bad for, like, you know, being one of the cheapest Z490 boards you can get. I still would strongly recommend that you just go for the Tomahawk instead. It's so much nicer. But yeah, so that's the MSI Z490 motherboard lineup there. I've forgotten how I wanted to what I wanted to do with that sentence, so we'll just leave it at lineup. And I guess thanks for watching. Like, share, subscribe, leave any comments, questions, suggestions down in the comment section below. If you'd like to support what I do here with actually hardcore overclocking, I have a Patreon where you can support me directly. There's a link to that down in the description below. There's also the AHOC Teespring store where you can pick up shirts, stickers, posters, you know, the usual YouTuber merch. That achieves the exact same thing as the Patreon. It helps me run the channel. There's a link to that down in the description below as well. And yeah, so that's it for the video. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.